Look, this is a very solid win for Donald Trump, but Nikki Haley still did better than many expected, even the polls. What did you make of her comments that, at this stage at least, she's refusing to withdraw?
Well, look, first of all, she has a right. I mean, you can stay in as long as you want, but the reality is, you notice she came out real quick. The vote that came in early was where she did better. The big suburbs of Boston, the Manchester, Concord, New Hampshire, those bedroom suburban communities just north of Boston. She knew she would do well, where independents were going to play a big role. She made a couple of mistakes. Number one, Nevada is actually the next stop. She's just not on the ballot there, which kind of is perplexing. The second thing is South Carolina is 31 days away. And you look at the polls in South Carolina, she's down 30 points in the state that she was elected governor twice. And almost every major endorsement from the federal level, from the senators to the current governor to the state representatives, are all with Trump. I just, the problem is that I don't see a viable path forward for her. I get what she did. Even if she continues to go past South Carolina, Super Tuesdays, 10 states, 870 delegates at stake, and you have to be able to run more than one state. So she's been able to park herself, if you will, in one state, Iowa, then New Hampshire, and she wants to go home to South Carolina. But you can't run into, these are supposed to allow the process to have a little time to percolate. She doesn't have the capability to go into to Super Tuesday the way that Donald Trump does.
If there is no viable path for her to defeat Trump, as you say, through these primaries, is Nikki Haley then relying on an external factor like the Democrats throwing Trump in jail, something like that, to see her win the nomination? Is that what's going on here?
I think you're putting your finger on something. The interesting thing is, we like to say, is it the black swan event, something kind of akin to what you're talking about. The problem is that there's none of his court cases are actually at a point where any of that could possibly happen. So I get it, but it's like you're running just on the hope that maybe something happens. And if it did, I would actually have a better chance of seeing somebody else get back in the race. You notice they always use these words: I suspended my campaign. That means that they're technically still filed. They're on the ballots. They could jump back in theory. But I think you're onto something. That's the only thing that's keeping her in this race, is this idea that maybe something happens. And that's no way to run a campaign.
The other suggestion, and we just heard it from Kayleigh McEnany, is that perhaps Nikki Haley's trying to manipulate a situation where she could be asked to be Trump's running mate, his VP. What do you think of that notion?
Nothing is ever out of the question. I think Trump put it to rest the other day. She has said it. Bush ended up being Reagan's vice presidential nominee in the 80s. It's possible. I just don't see it. There's too much bad blood now between the two of them. She didn't want to stay on as his UN ambassador. I just don't get the vibe that she's ever really wanted to be Donald Trump's number two.
Vivek Ramaswamy, who's now supporting Trump, he said today that suspending her campaign would be the right thing for Nikki Haley to do for the country, for the United States. Do you agree with this?
Look, I think, as I said, I think it is inevitable that Donald Trump ends up our nominee, and the sooner we can turn to a general election where we can lay out that case between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, what 4 years of accomplishment under Donald Trump was like versus the 3 years that we've seen both domestically and internationally under President Biden. It's a very clear and easy case to make. I mean, she has a right to do it, but we're wasting time and money that could be focused on winning in November.
Looking at the Democrats, Joe Biden wasn't even on the primary ballot papers in New Hampshire. He attacks Trump for being undemocratic. He says this election is going to be about democracy. But then, Sean, what does it say that he was too scared to have his own name on the ballot paper?
It gets worse. They had the state of Florida literally canceled their primary. And then he and his team are trying to take Donald Trump off the ballot in the primary in several states, like in Colorado, Maine, not the general election yet. They're actually trying to keep him off the primary ballot. That's not democratic at all. And so to be lectured by these guys on democracy and democracy being under attack when they're trying to inhibit people from actually casting a vote and being able to choose who they want, I think that's a real tell right there who's truly not supporting democracy.